I always liked Super Mario 64 when I was a kid. I remember playing at my aunt's house all the time. One day, a pop-up appeared out of nowhere as I was watching gameplay footage on YouTube. I was a little startled and I was about to close the window, until I realized that it was a website showing a mint-condition copy of Mario 64 for sale. There was a picture and everything. I usually don't trust these things, but the feeling of nostalgia overpowered me, and I wanted to buy it. The whole business was peculiar, seeing how the owner of the game wanted the buyer to send an envelope containing $10 to an address on the site, instead of using something like PayPal. What made things even more strange was that when I tried to gain access to the site, it was nowhere to be found. A few days after the $10 was mailed, I got a package containing a new copy of the game. The first thing I noticed when I opened the box was that the official sticker with Mario flying in the air was apparently peeled off or something, and in its place was a piece of duct tape with Mario crudely written on it with marker. I felt a little ripped off, but as long as the game worked, I didn't really care. I got out my N64 and put in the cartridge. The screen turned on, with the familiar Mario face that you could stretch and twist aimlessly. I remember laughing all the time at the results as a kid, and decided to mess around for old time's sake. I moved the cursor over to Mario's ear, and pulled it to elven proportions. I was going to do the same with the other ear, when the TV suddenly produced loud static. Mario's whole head started deforming and twisting in ways that I didn't even know were possible for the model. Random sound effects from the game started playing along with the static. As all this was occurring, I could hear a faint voice whispering in Japanese. The voice was stammering and whimpering. I immediately shut the game off and tried again. I didn't bother with the Mario head this time, just selected a new file and started playing. When I selected the file, the game skipped the opening monologue by Peach in the courtyard outside. Mario was just placed right into the castle. Creepier still. Bowser didn't say anything either. I tried to ignore it and play it anyway. However, I noticed that there were no music, just dead silence. There weren't even any toads around to talk to. The only door I could enter was the big Bob-omb battlefield. The portrait of the level wasn't the usual picture. It was just a stark white canvas. I was still trying to convince myself that these were all just minor glitches, and that they wouldn't affect the gameplay. Once I entered, the image suddenly went from the blank canvas to Lethal Lava Land. The mission select menu came up. Yet another weird detail was present. Instead of Big Bob-omb on the summit, the mission was called Turn Back. I have no idea what drove me to press A, but I did. The level seemed normal at first. Everything was how I remembered it. I thought I could finally enjoy my childhood game. But then I saw him. Luigi. And I was absolutely shocked. Even though he was in the DS version, he was never in the original. His model wasn't even a Mario palette swap. It looked like a completely original model. I tried to approach him until he started running at unexpected speeds. I followed suit and went through the level. Strange things happen as I pursue him. Each time I pick up a coin, the enemies and music would get slower. The scenery would look darker and morbid. It kept getting worse until I collected a 5th coin. Then the music stopped, and the enemies dropped dead. Once I reached the summit, I saw another object out of place. A small cottage was all that's seen on the top of the hill. Luigi was nowhere to be found. The cottage was certainly odd looking for a Mario game. It was old, plain, and broken down. Regardless of my fears at that moment, I had Mario enter the cottage. But as soon as the door closed, a disturbing picture of a hanged Luigi immediately popped up with a frightening scarecrow. Mario fell to his knees and sobbed for roughly 5 minutes. Then the screen irised out. Mario was then slumped out of the level, and the image of the portrait switched from Lethal Lava Land to the image of Luigi hanging himself. The room was completely different this time. Now a small hallway where toads wearing white robes with blank expressions on their faces lined up on each side of the hall. There, on the opposite end, was another painting that just completely and utterly scared me. It was a picture of my family. It wasn't even a photo from the time that Mario 64 was released. I reached for the on and off switch. There was no way I was going to play this anymore. However, when I flipped the switch to off, the game was still on. I flipped it back and forth, but to no avail. I even tried to unplug the whole system, but it never left the screen. I was still able to control Mario, so I had no choice but to keep playing. I went into my family photo. There was only one mission available. This one was called Run, Don't Walk. I selected the mission.
Let's go.
The level started in a flooded hallway with platforms floating in the water. The camera then turned to show what was behind Mario. A silent black void was slowly approaching him. It didn't look like anything. It didn't even look like finished graphics. Just a big, giant, blocky black blob. I started jumping from platform to platform with no goal in sight. I kept on running. The figure was slowly but surely gaining speed. This kept going on what felt like hours. Mario was just going in circles. Finally, the black blob void thing caught up with Mario and enveloped him in darkness. He didn't scream or resist at all. It just consumed him. Mario fell out of the painting. I lost one of my 3 lives. The room was different now. Some of the toads were gone, and the painting looked different. Me and my family were in the same position, but our bodies were partially decomposed. It looked too real to be photoshopped. It looked more like someone just took our dead bodies and posed them. Regardless, I jumped into the painting again. There was still only one mission available. It was called I'm Right Here. Mario landed in a small dark room. There was no visible way out. The room was empty, except for a piano at the corner. I knew what that meant. I was stuck in here with the mad piano from Big Boo's haunt. I approached it, and it started chasing me as always. There was no way to damage it, so I had no choice but to let Mario take damage. When he lost all of his health, the usual death animation didn't happen. He just got mauled by the piano. His blood and guts spilled all over the floor, and the camera pans to a top-down view of his corpse. A distorted version of the merry-go-round music played as the screen slowly transitioned from an in-game shot to a photorealistic sketch of Mario's dead body. I cried softly as I gazed upon the image. I lost another life. The photo of my family was shown again. We were even more rotten than before. The view zoomed into the painting like I was warping in again. I was greeted with the shot of Peach's castle from outside. The castle was crumbling in ruins. The fields were on fire. The sky was pitch black as night. Bowser's laugh played on a loop in the background as children mockingly chanted, until a close-up of Peach's face accompanied with an extremely loud screech interrupted the loop without notice. Her mouth was wide open, as if she were screaming, and her eyes were empty black holes. Nothing but pierced black eyes. Mario was once again ejected out of the painting. Now all the toads were gone, and me and my family looked positively repulsive. Maggots were wriggling around in holes in our flesh. Guts were spilling out of our bodies. My dad's eyeball was hanging loose from its socket. It was too much to bear. But something still urged me to trudge on. I jumped back into the painting, with only one life remaining. This time there was no name for this mission. Just a blank space where the title should be. I selected the mission. Mario landed on a small island in the middle of the ocean. There was a solitary sign that only reads, "Dive." I did just as Wood said, and entered the water. The ocean was dark and empty. No fish. I wasn't able to see anything. I swam downwards. I kept going for quite some time, yet Mario never ran out of breath. I counted roughly 10 minutes of swimming until I decided to go back up. Just as I turned Mario around, it came. A huge, and I mean huge, Unagi the eel from Jolly Roger Bay came out of nowhere and swallowed Mario whole. I was dumbfounded. It went by so fast, I wasn't even sure what I saw. The game over screen didn't show up. All that happened was a fade out. The photo of my family was shown again. Now we were playing skeletons. Once again, it looked very real. I couldn't move the camera at all. It just stayed focused on the picture. I shut off the game and turned it on again. I chose my file, but it just went to the skeleton photo of my family. I tried this about 3 more times before giving up. I desperately wanted to stop, but some force kept me from walking away. I decided to select the only other save file. The camera once again focused on the skeleton picture, but this time, they were in different positions, as if they were a different family.
You want fun? Wario show you fun.